This is the Week in Sustainability from Sustain.Life. It's where our team of sustainability experts and practitioners share commentary to keep you up to date on developing stories and news.
Welcome back to the Week in Sustainability, or as we're calling it today, the Year in Sustainability. I'm Anna Lee, CEO of Sustain.Life. You may remember my voice from episode 3, where we talked about the fascinating world of plant-based meats and cellular agriculture. Today, I'm back to mark a full year of the Week in Sustainability. This is our 52nd episode, and we're taking a step back to appreciate the journey we've been on over the past 365 days. And we'll also peer into our crystal ball for what's on the horizon. Now, it's been a year of ups and downs with exciting progress in terms of grants and incentives, as well as ingenuity in terms of climate adaptation. But on the downside, we've also tracked more extreme weather and heat impacts than we ever have in the past. And looking forward, we expect those physical climate risks to be increasingly top of mind for businesses and for us as well. But let's start by rewinding the clock. So, one of our first discussions revolved around the Inflation Reduction Act, or the IRA for short. When the IRA was first introduced, experts projected it would steer around $370 billion towards clean energy projects. But the landscape has been evolving rapidly, and we're now looking at projections that go up to an amazing $1.2 trillion. And let's give credit where it's due. That's because companies are not just keeping pace, they're actually ahead of the game. So since the IRA came into effect, organizations have earmarked more than $150 billion for clean energy initiatives, which is 50% ahead of plan. And the ripple effects are crossing borders, putting pressure on other nations to follow suit. So we've got the Green Deal Industrial Plan in the EU and $15 billion for solar and battery manufacturing in Australia's National Reconstruction Fund. And on another high note, the supply chain is increasingly driving sustainability. Now, we talked about this just recently, but we're seeing more and more big players urging their suppliers to monitor and disclose their carbon footprint. Now, these companies aren't waiting for the SEC requirements and EU laws to fully take effect. They're proactively pressing suppliers to get prepared now. So just in the past month, we've seen Amazon, SAP, and several leading pharmaceutical firms jumping on board with that. And we're thrilled to be a part of it ourselves. We're collaborating with suppliers to Microsoft, Costco, and REI, to name a few. It's really exciting to see the progress that those companies have already made. But we've also kept our eye on ground level changes, quite literally ground level. So state and local authorities have been pushing for sustainable construction practices, also a really big story this year. And that includes natural gas-free new builds. So we talked about this in the context of New York, but the numbers are really encouraging. We see 6 states that have rolled out statewide regulations and 103 towns or counties across 11 states that have set their own standards. So we love seeing communities put this kind of focus on electrification. And with support from the IRA to green the grid, this greater focus on electrification means more efficient homes and businesses, as well as better indoor air quality as you start switching to those electric appliances. And the IRA isn't just focusing on the renewable side of the equation, right? So thinking about the greening the grid piece. So even if your town isn't mandating gas-free builds, or if you're in an existing home and you're not building a new home, individuals can still benefit from IRA incentives for things like electric stoves, heat pumps, and electric vehicles, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So moving from the man-made to the natural world, we can't ignore over the past year the increasing toll of extreme weather. So the huge story this summer was that July was reportedly the hottest month the Earth has seen in 120,000 years. 120,000 years. We're witnessing an uptick in natural disasters from wildfires to floods. And while it's tricky to link each event solely to climate change, the heightened frequency is undeniably linked to our warming globe. And speaking of all that heat, we turned our spotlight on urban heat islands this year. We were specifically talking about Phoenix, Arizona, where they saw a really lengthy period of record-breaking heat. But we're seeing this urban heat island effect happen other places too. So the urban heat island effect, that's when cities replace natural land cover with dense concentrations of pavement, buildings, and other surfaces that absorb and retain heat. So a recent Climate Central study shows that the urban heat island effect impacts 44 large US cities, not just Phoenix, raising local temperatures by a minimum of 8 degrees Fahrenheit. But on the brighter side, we're also seeing inventive adaptive strategies being tested, ranging from urban tree planting to heat reflecting paints, to resurrecting some sort of, millennia old techniques in Europe around how we can use water and underground canals to cool the air around us, which is super cool. But despite all that adaptation, let's not forget that climate change is also making certain areas less hospitable for human life. So, a new study in Nature Sustainability indicates that for every additional tenth of a degree of warming, 140 million people will be living in areas that can no longer be considered part of the habitable zone, with temperatures and precipitation levels that support agriculture and economic growth. And many of those impacted will be in the developing world, but we also see evidence of serious physical climate risks in the US. So if you look at insurance giants like Allstate and State Farm pulling out of California due to rising catastrophe risks, as well as farmers ceasing to renew policies in Florida. So these physical risks can really echo through the supply chain. So as factories and workers have to close or relocate, either because of an actual natural disaster or just because of their increased cost to operate in those locations, these changes really start to impact the bottom line. So we're looking for climate change risk mitigation to become a bigger part of the business conversation in the near future. And we're already starting to see some of that. But it's not all doom and gloom. So circling back to the EVs that we talked about before, the automotive industry is increasingly driving towards a more sustainable future. So almost every car maker now offers an electric vehicle, and many have even set science-based decarbonization targets, from BMW to GM, Tesla, Toyota, and more. And electric cars, which accounted for only 4% of sales in 2020, which is not that long ago, they skyrocketed to a 14% share of sales in 2022, and that number is expected to keep increasing really rapidly in 2023. So, considering that road transport contributes over 15% of global energy related emissions, this shift is really big. And those cars are getting more affordable too. So, prices for new EVs have fallen nearly 20% year over year owing to inventory growth, and used EV prices have fallen almost 30%. And IRA tax credits can also help lower those costs even more. So, if you're not driving an EV yet, maybe it's time to go car shopping. As we wrap up, we're eager to explore another year of sustainability milestones with you, and we're all ears for what you'd like us to cover next. So until next week, let's continue this conversation and keep pushing the needle towards a more sustainable future.
Sustain.Life is the leading and most comprehensive sustainability software on the market. To learn how we can help your company measure its emissions and take climate action, go to Sustain.Life. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this show on our YouTube channel or your favorite podcast platform. Thanks for tuning in. See you next week.